Gojo uses his supreme art in JJK0 and throughout the main story. At least, if we break down how supreme arts are supposed to work, based on what cursed techniques are meant to be for the purpose of Jujutsu Kaisen as a story, then the supreme art of the Limitless technique would be pretty straightforward, and it would give Gojo an ability we've already seen him use. Cursed energy is hard to produce and affected by other cursed energy, so it's difficult to control. So there are mental approaches sorcerers use to control this wider force as much as possible. Because cursed energy has a level of intelligence, and is a cushion that offsets destruction by storing it as energy, it has a tendency to connect and layer itself in wider currents. So as it accumulates, it forms layers of directed activity that make sorcery feel like it has intelligence, or that it's alive. There are various ways sorcerers can use this to their advantage. If they put themselves at the mercy of a wider flow of cursed energy, they can have that flow guide and maintain their sorcery for them. Like handcuffing yourself to a branch so you won't fall out of a tree if you're clumsy or run out of stamina, which seems to be the idea behind binding vows, where there are varying degrees of rewards and risks depending on the level of current you're inviting and aligning yourself with. But even outside of binding vows, sorcerers rely on the connectedness and wider currents of cursed energy to boost their power and precision. The more chants or rituals you put into a technique, the more you can draw out its power. And if you tell other people your technique, so the whole local area has cursed energy being produced and influenced with comprehension and acknowledgement of your technique from both sides, it's the difference between running upwind and downwind. It's a lot easier to use your technique when the local cursed energy validates and encourages it, so you're not fighting through neutral cursed energy to force your effects to occur. Which would be the same reason it's a lot harder to make a lethal domain, because domains that only enforce directly safe rules provide reassurance, which would get local currents of cursed energy on board. There are even intricate applications of cursed energy that align with the principles of cursed energy, separation, and middlemen, which let people learn to use them regardless of whether they're born with a physical circuit to do so, like barriers and shikigami. But otherwise, if you want to be able to use your cursed energy in an advanced way, regardless of what other cursed energy is doing outside your body, you need a circuit for a cursed technique in something like your brain. The idea is you're loosely putting cursed energy through pipes, where the ways it would naturally flow inside these pipes would separate and organize it so it can produce a more precise effect than a human could bend cursed energy to produce on command. Any cursed technique can be broken down into two types of operations, caused by flowing raw cursed energy through the structure of a circuit. You can use this structure to regulate how the energy is output and applied to use it in intricate ways, and you can augment the cursed energy to twist its effect into something more flavored than pure destruction. A basic cursed technique could do something like make cursed energy acidic and launch it forward in streams, letting the user spray acid made of cursed energy. Gojo's Limitless is way more complex. At the very least, it needs 3 parts to its circuit. In order to let Gojo burn cursed energy to hold things in place with more and more force the closer they get to him, so they stop before they can reach him, he needs a switch that lets him toggle the cursed technique so it can automatically use and apply more of his cursed energy for him whenever something gets close. He needs to convert the energy from destruction to attraction so it can add force to pull things into place to match how far they try to move without crushing them. So that's why it's pulling, which just makes it feel like there's more space or a wall in front of them, rather than pushing, which would damage them, making the technique more intrusive and upwind. And lastly, he needs to be able to output the energy a distance away from him, at the position of whatever he's trying to hold in place. Gojo's technique is the strongest, partly because it outsources application to the circuit itself. It can fire automatically, surpassing human reflexes. But it can exhaust his brain, and it would need to let things get as close as possible to be as efficient as possible at scanning them, projecting his cursed energy, and freezing them. If he skips the first part of the circuit, lapsing the overall technique to ignore the regulator that can automatically and precisely apply his cursed energy, he can use as much cursed energy as he wants for attraction, although he'd only have the precision to manually be able to output the energy at one point around him. This lapse lets him output as much cursed energy as he manually can, but he only does it by isolating a part of his basic technique. So what's a supreme art? There are ways you can expand what your cursed technique does. If you use some binding vows and meet the right conditions, you can apply your technique's basic abstract concept to a different target, like taking the water sprays in a drive-through car wash, breaking them out of their clamps to free the individual hoses, and then dragging them with you to be able to water a garden. You're using the loose and imprecise nature of cursed techniques, since their energy loosely poured through rigid circuits to naturally flow in more controlled patterns, and you're creating some kind of current outside the technique, so the energy and core logic of the technique can be applied in a new overall way. This is called an extension, and it uses your loose technique as a building block by forming another circuit around it through skill, barriers, and binding vows. But there's an opposite way you can advance a cursed technique. If you only have to loosely pour cursed energy into a circuit, and how it naturally flows and pools through the circuit will align it in a usable way, what if you carefully controlled your cursed energy so it precisely follows the exact logical structure of the circuit, instead of letting it loosely flow through its chambers? What's the most specific and intense behavior you'd get by following a circuit as purely as possible? This is the maximum technique, or the supreme art, which would have two effects on your technique. First, it would exaggerate every part of your technique, since you're refining the pure concepts. If your technique is about using blood as an abstract weapon by making it destructive toward other people so it can be corrosive or place an effect that lets you use your cursed energy to poison whoever it injures, the purest form of that concept would be physically projecting your blood to physically damage targets, giving you an ability that's similar to blood manipulation but would be easier to control, since it would automatically let you shape your blood into aggressive streams that can pierce enemies or stay around your body. The second effect of a supreme art is that since you're tightly aligning your cursed energy to the exact structure of the circuit, you're embodying all of its logic at the same time, instead of in sequence. So for something complex, like Gojo's, every separately exaggerated piece of the technique is combined into one overall function. For example, the first ever supreme art we're told about, Uzumaki, comes from cursed spirit manipulation, which lets you control cursed spirits, morph their bodies into something you can consume to establish a more permanent hold over them, and house them within your body to summon them and use their power at will. Uzumaki controls the cursed energy their bodies are made of, actually permanently consuming those spirits to use for raw power, while granting you, yourself, single uses of their techniques, all in one move. A supreme art is the opposite of a cursed technique extension. Instead of using the technique as a building block or foundation for any number of new, larger functions, we're taking the essence of it and embodying it at once so we have the purest form of the logic of the technique. So let's look at the other supreme art we know of as our last example. Jogo's a curse from the fear of the might of the earth, and heat and lava are the planet's energy and blood, so his technique takes after heat, so flames. He can build destructive force, like heat. He can use matter as a medium, setting things on fire, manipulating hot materials like lava, and summoning middlemen like Shikigami and geysers to transfer that heat and apply that destructive force. And like flames and heat, he can affect things from a distance and spread his cursed energy to them. If we combine the logic of building power, using matter as fuel, and affecting anything over distances in an exaggerated way, we get an ability that builds up a large attack by pulling in objects over distances to add their mass to its power, which is how Jogo's supreme art, the meteor, works. So if we apply the formula for a supreme art to Gojo's Limitless, the next level of automation would be the idea of facilitating, doing all of the busy work and processing to make something happen reliably, safely, and smoothly. The next level of attraction, pulling things in and moving them toward you, would be immediately warping something across distances to you. And the next level of connecting to a position around you would let you lock onto a spot any distance away. Combining all three refined aspects of Limitless together, you get a supreme art that would facilitate long-distance teleportation between two chosen points of space, functionally connecting them by bridging the sections of space between them, so things can smoothly travel from one to the other. It would be long-distance teleportation, the thing Gojo can somehow do, that we first see him use at the start of the same fight Uzumaki and the idea of supreme arts are introduced.